she'll listen closely. When darkness wraps the world and dreams begin to stir, you've arrived at the right place. Welcome to Between Dreams and Shadows, the sanctuary of stories that live between sleep and the unknown. Here, every tale is more than a story. It's a portal to hidden worlds, forgotten secrets, whispers from beyond, and shadows that speak as your eyes begin to close. If you're drawn to mysteries, haunting legends, and stories that send shivers down your spine, this channel is your new nighttime ritual. Before we begin, I invite you to become part of this growing nightbound community. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a tale. New stories drop regularly, always under the veil of night. Like this video if you enjoy that chill before sleep. It helps this channel grow and lets me bring you deeper, darker stories. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a strange dream or felt something watching in the dark? Your experience might inspire the next tale now. Take a deep breath, turn off the lights, leave the world behind, and get ready to drift between dreams and shadows. Setting the atmosphere, it started on a Wednesday night, a night like any other quiet, with the subtle rustle of leaves brushing against the window pane and the occasional hum of a distant passing car. The kind of night where the world feels muted and your breath becomes the loudest sound in the room. I had just moved back into my childhood home, a modest two-story nestled at the edge of a rural town where the nights came thick and early. My sister Lila still lived there, having never moved out after our parents passed away. She was always different, quiet, thoughtful, and deeply connected to things most people never noticed. She claimed to dream in colors no one else could see. I returned after losing my job in the city, a temporary stay. I told myself, just long enough to catch my breath. But something in the house felt different now. It wasn't the peeling wallpaper or the faint scent of lavender and dust. It was something subtler. Lila's room was still at the end of the hallway, just past mine. She hadn't changed a thing. Her shelves were filled with old paperbacks, dried flowers, and little figurines of animals she claimed she saw in dreams. At night, her door stayed slightly ajar, and through it, I could hear her whispering. I first noticed it during my second night. The hour had just crept past 2 a.m. when I woke suddenly, as if someone had been standing over me. My heart thudded once, then twice, and then silence. I lay still, eyes open, staring at the ceiling as a breeze touched the curtains, though no windows were open. Then, I heard it, a voice soft and lilting coming from Lila's room. Her voice. She was talking to someone, but her tone was wrong. It was slow and distant, like someone remembering a story not quite their own. I listened. She would pause often, as if waiting for replies, but no one else was in that room. The next morning, I asked her about it, casually over breakfast. She blinked once, smiled faintly, and said, "I sleep alone, but I'm never really alone. You know." There was a glint in her eyes that unsettled me more than her words. Not malice, no. It was something else. Something harder to define. As though she pitied me for asking. From then on, I stayed up later, listening, and every night, without fail, the soft conversations would resume. She always whispered, and the pauses were too regular, too precise, as if someone or something was replying. The air in the house grew heavier with each passing night. At first, it was just a sensation, like walking into a room just after someone has left. A presence hanging in the silence. The hallway lights would flicker now and then, and in the living room mirror, I began to think I saw movement where there should be none. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing ever moved in front of me. Nothing ever screamed, but there was that subtle, gnawing feeling deep in the pit of my stomach, like the knowledge that something was watching me from the corner of the room, just outside the field of my vision. And Lila, she seemed calmer than ever, almost radiant, as though her late-night conversations were fulfilling. But every time I looked into her eyes, I felt a chill, a creeping sense that she wasn't entirely my sister anymore. Or worse, that something else was wearing her skin, just well enough to pass. The first signs of disturbance it wasn't long before the house began to change. Not in ways others would notice, not in the light of day, not in photographs. But I knew, I felt it. It started with the smallest of shifts. A cup I distinctly remembered placing in the sink would be on the table again in the morning. My bedroom door, always shut tight before bed, was cracked open just enough to invite doubt. My phone charger, always coiled neatly, would lay stretched across the floor reaching toward the hallway. I told myself it was fatigue, stress. Moving back to this house, this memory-soaked structure, must have been playing tricks on me. But some part of me buried deep already knew that wasn't true. The shadows in the house began to misbehave. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a book I wasn't really reading. The low-hanging bulb above cast a steady golden glow, but in the corner near the pantry door, the shadows didn't quite match. It wasn't just that they were darker, it was the way they moved, or rather, the way they didn't. They stayed still when the light swayed, unbating, unchanging, and then, as if realizing I was watching them, they would slither subtly back into their expected shape. But only after I blinked. I thought it was exhaustion, so I began writing things down. A journal, of sorts. I noted everything. The times, the changes, what I thought I saw. But even writing it felt pointless. The events were too strange, too slippery. I could never seem to fully recall them once the sun rose. Then came the plants. Lila kept dozens of them in her room, climbers, succulents, little moss terrariums. One morning, as I passed by her door, I noticed the ivy had crept out of its pot. Not down, not toward the window, but up the wall, and around the doorframe, like fingers, searching for a lock. I leaned in to look closer, only to hear her voice from within, whispering, steady, rhythmical. "They know you now." I froze. "They see your name." My skin prickled as I stepped back. When I asked Leela later about the ivy, she smiled again. That same soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She said, "The plants had always grown like that. They're just sensitive to people. They like you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing something, a gentle thud, every few minutes, from the hallway. I finally rose, creeping toward the sound, careful not to make the floorboards cry out. It led me to the mirror in the hall. I stared into my own tired reflection for a long moment. My pulse quieted, my breath steadied. Then, I saw it. Behind me, just a flicker. Someone moving. In Leela's room. A tall, thin silhouette, passing between the folds of her curtains. Too tall to be her. Too still to be alive. But when I turned around, the hallway was empty. And her door was ajar again. The air was cold. Not icy, but heavy, with something I couldn't name. It wrapped around my shoulders like a wet cloth. I stood there, staring into the dark of her room, heart hammering quietly. And from inside, her voice floated out, "Calm, whispering. He's listening now." The sound that shouldn't exist. The next night, I began to record the house. I didn't tell Leela. Something told me not to. She wouldn't have cared, probably. But I was starting to feel like the house itself would. I downloaded a voice recording app on my phone and left it running beside my bed as I slept, or tried to. My eyes refused to stay closed for long anymore. Every creak, every gust of wind against the eaves sounded wrong, like a question I didn't understand. That night, I must have dozed off sometime after 3. In the morning, the recording was still running, 3 hours and 12 minutes long. Most of it was silence, as expected, occasional tossing in bed, distant traffic, the buzz of electricity. But at 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 43 seconds, there was a sound, a soft hum. At first it resembled the low vibration of distant machinery, but it shifted quickly, rising and falling in frequency like a language with no vowels. Beneath it, just barely, I heard what could have been breathing, Not mine. Slower, measured, as though someone else was in the room, just watching. Then came the whisper. It wasn't Leela, and it wasn't me. The voice was thin and sharp, like something trying to imitate speech. It said, "He dreams with his eyes open." That was it. Just that dot. I replayed the segment over and over again. I tried to clean it up with audio tools, listened with headphones, without headphones, slowed it down. It was real. I knew it was, even if I didn't want it to be. Later that afternoon, I stood in the hallway, looking at the door to Lila's room. It was closed for once. Quiet, too quiet. Too quiet. I knocked. "Hey, you alright?" No answer. I turned the knob and peeked in. She sat on her bed, facing the window, still. Her shoulders moved slowly as she breathed. On her lap, one of her sketchbooks lay open, filled with rough pencil strokes, lines forming eyes, dozens of them dot wide, lidless pupilless eyes, covering every inch of the page. None of them were shaded in, just hollow circles staring outward, eternally alert. "Leela?" I asked. She turned, slowly, as if returning from somewhere far away. "I can't draw their mouths," she said softly. "I don't know how they sound when they're smiling." My blood ran cold. That night, I left the recorder running again, but this time, I set another device outside Lila's door, just beneath the ivy-wrapped frame. I didn't sleep. I stayed up, watching the waveform move in real time, and at 2:03 a.m., it spiked. I pressed playback immediately. Leela's voice came first, clearer than ever. But it wasn't a conversation, not anymore. It was a chant, rhythmic, unnatural, and underneath her lured beneath. Her voice, like a shadow beneath a foot, was something else. Not a voice, a click, like bone tapping on glass again, and again, like it was testing the boundary of something just barely holding. Suddenly, the device cut out. I ran to her room, heart pounding. The door was wide open. Lila wasn't in bed. The curtains were billowing inward, though the window was closed. I stepped in, trembling, and there, scrawled across the floor in charcoal from her, "Sketch set," was a phrase I hadn't heard before, written in looping, childlike letters. They don't speak, they listen louder. The presence without a face after that night. I couldn't deny it anymore. Something was in the house. Not someone, not exactly, but something. An intelligence, a presence, a pressure in the corners of each room. It didn't walk. It didn't speak, not in any way humans understand. But it watched, and it waited. Lila returned to her room by morning as if nothing had happened. I asked her gently where she'd gone during the night. She smiled at me, brushing a bit of dust from her sleeve. "I never left. Maybe you just weren't looking right." There was no point pressing. I saw it in her eyes. She believed it. Or maybe, worst, she was right. That day, I decided to stay in the living room, where the light was strongest. I sat with the curtains drawn back wide, phone in hand, and every intention to leave the moment the sun set. But the feeling didn't go away. Even in the daylight, it stood just behind the light, as if something was pressing against the walls of the house from the inside. At one point, I walked into the kitchen and stopped cold. Every cabinet was open, every drawer. Even the refrigerator hung slightly ajar, humming louder than it should. None of it had made a sound. It had all just happened. When I called for Lila, there was no answer. Her door was closed again, the ivy now curling along the floorboards outside her room like veins in pale skin. I closed the cabinets. I closed the fridge. I told myself I had imagined it. But then when I went to grab a glass of water, something slid across the counter, just beyond my reach. A spoon? It moved an inch. No noise. No fan. No draft. Just movement. I stared at it, and I swear I felt its gaze, as if, in that moment, the house was watching me watch it. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in my room, with every light on, phone in one hand, a small carving, knife in the other, Not that it would help. At 2:14 a.m., the hallway light went out. Not flickered, it snapped off. A sharp click, like a switch thrown by invisible hands. Then, footsteps. Light, slow, but not from above. Not from Leela's room, from the walls. The steps sounded inside them, like something walking between the plaster and the paint, as though the house was hollow, and it had made a home within. I pressed my ear to the wall. Silence then. Directly behind the drywall, a whispering scrape like fingernails moving across a chalkboard, slow and deliberate. I jerked away, heart thudding so loud, it drowned out all thought. And then, stillness. Only the sound of my own panicked breath. I turned on my phone's flashlight and swung open my bedroom door, half expecting to see Lila there, sleepwalking. But there was no one, just darkness. And down the hall, her door opened once. Again, the light inside was dim, and in the center of the room, on the floor, stood one of her sketches. It had been torn from the book and pinned to the floor with a knitting needle. It was a face, but it had no mouth, no nose, just eyes, 4 of them, uneven, staring in all directions. Beneath it, she'd scrawled, "It's not hiding, it's just waiting for you to see it." The unspoken warning. I left the drawing where it lay. Somehow, I felt that if I touched it, if I acknowledged it, if might acknowledge me back in a way I couldn't undo. For the next few days, I stayed quiet. I avoided questions. I watched Lila more closely, but she was always one step ahead, speaking softly under her breath when she thought I wasn't listening. Her fingers tracing patterns in the air, like she was remembering music no one else could hear. Every so often, I would catch her staring into empty space, her mouth barely moving, as if in conversation. But her eyes were focused, too focused, like she was seeing something. And then the patterns began. They appeared in the dust, in the fog on the bathroom mirror, in the condensation on the window. Always the same. A small circle surrounded by 4 smaller ones, uneven and lopsided, like a child's drawing of a constellation. They followed me. I'd clean them off, only to find them reappear hours later in places I hadn't been. Once, I found one drawn on the inside of my closet door, another on the sole of my shoe. It was deliberate. It was a message, but the warning didn't come in words. It came in dreams. One night, after a particularly heavy storm rolled through, I collapsed from exhaustion. I didn't mean to sleep, but I did, and in that sleep, I saw it. A long hallway, endless, the walls breathing like lungs. Every door pulsed faintly, and from behind each one came a muffled sound, scraping, whispering, the tapping of fingernails against wood. I walked forward, slowly, powerless to turn back. At the end of the hallway stood a door painted black, cracked with age. The wood shimmered like wet ink, and on it, etched deeply, was that symbol, the central eye with 4 smaller ones around it. I reached for the doorknob just before I touched it. Something whispered behind me, "You can open it, but you won't come back the same." I woke in a sweat, lungs aching, throat dry. The clock read 3:33 a.m. At the foot of my bed lay Lila's sketchbook, open to a blank page, except for the symbol, drawn in thick dark pencil at the very center. I took it to her room, furious and afraid. "Why are you doing this? Why now?" She didn't answer immediately, just stared at the sketchbook in my hands like she didn't recognize it. Then she said, quietly, "It's not me. It's always been the house. It waits for someone to see it." I tried to demand more answers, but she only whispered, "You shouldn't have listened." That night, I didn't sleep. I heard the sound again, faint and constant. Not whispers, not footsteps, a low, rhythmic knocking from inside the walls. 3 knocks, then silence, then 3 more. A pattern, not random, a code. And then something terrifying dawned on me. It was trying to communicate. The moment of truth. By now, the house felt different. Not just eerie-aware. Every sound felt intentional. Every shadow, a test. And I realized something even worse than being haunted. I was being studied. I started mapping the knocks. Every night. 3:33 a.m. sharp. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 again. Then a longer pause. Eventually, 5. Then 4. Then 3. They weren't random. They were responding to me. I began to knock back once. Then again, silence. Then the knocks came, again closer. That night, I sat in the hallway outside Lila's room. Ivy curled around the baseboards now like veins. Thick and alive. I pressed my ear to the wall, and I asked, softly, "What do you want?" At first, nothing. Then, from deep within the wall, a breath, not air, but the sound of something parting from itself. And a single word, witness. I staggered back. That was the moment I knew I could either keep pretending, or lean in. Discover what this thing wanted, what it really was, so I made a choice. I opened Leela's door. She was sitting on the floor, eyes closed, muttering phrases that hurt my ears the moment I tried to remember them. Her sketchbook was open beside her, no longer filled with faces, but symbols. Strange, elegant. Shapes that pulsed faintly in the dim room like dying stars. She opened her eyes slowly when I entered. "You're ready?" she said. Not a question. "Ready for what?" I asked. But she didn't answer. Instead, she reached under her bed and pulled out a single, yellowed envelope. My name was written on it in her handwriting. Inside was a photo of me, sleeping, taken from above, except there was no ceiling in the shot, just blackness. And behind me something tall, something not human. A figure made of angles that shouldn't exist, leaning over me as I slept. The image was warped, stretched, as if it resisted being captured. "I didn't take it," Lila said quietly. "It left it for me, so I would understand, so I wouldn't be afraid." "Afraid of what?" She paused, her voice distant. "Of the truth." The lights in her room dimmed suddenly, not flickered, dimmed, as though obeying something unseen. And from the corner of the room, the darkest one, came that same rhythmic knocking. Once, twice, a pause. Then the voice returned, but this time, it was inside my head. No language, just the understanding. "You wanted to know, so see." The wall began to bend. Not bend as though it were breathing flesh. Not plaster. A small slit opened in it like an eyelid, and from within, something looked out. I didn't scream. I didn't run, because I understood now. This wasn't an invasion, it was an invitation, and I had just accepted. The inevitability of darkness. It began with silence. After the eye opened in the wall, everything else in the room dimmed, not just the lights, but sound. The usual creaks of the house fell away. No hum from electronics. Not even the distant barking of the neighbor's dog. Just the thick, heavy stillness of something holding its breath. Lila didn't move. She didn't need to. She had seen it before. I stared into the slit in the wall, where the eye blinked slowly, lazily, like something not quite awake. Its surface shimmered not like liquid, but like glass stretched too thin, bulging inward. Behind it, shadows shifted, not cast by anything but moving of their own will. Then, something else began to emerge. Not a hand, not a claw, not anything I could name. It was formless, like water that remembered being a shape, pushing its way through the slit in the wall. It moved without moving, like a thought pressing into physical space. It didn't reach for me, it didn't need to. Instead, it placed something on the floor, a drawing, no paper, no graphite, no ink. Just the outline of a shape burned into the wood grain itself, as if seared into existence. It was a door, and it matched the one from my dream, the one at the end of the endless hallway. But now it was here, and it was open. I blinked, and Leela stood beside me, calm, eyes shining with tears that didn't fall. I didn't want you to come this far, she whispered. But it was always going to happen. That's what it does. It shows us what I asked, and her voice trembled, where fear comes from. The door and the floor began to bleed darkness upward, not ink or shadow, but the absence of light rising in smoky tendrils. The walls warped again, their angles wrong now, sloping into unnatural curves as though rejecting the laws they'd always obeyed. And the house breathed once. Then again, its breath pulled me closer. I should have run. I should have screamed. But neither action made sense anymore. I looked back at Lila. How long have you known? Her answer was slow, measured. I was 5 when it first whispered to me. When Mom and Dad stopped hearing me talk in my sleep. That's when they started listening instead. A new realization struck me like ice. They hadn't died in the car. Accident. They'd vanished. No bodies were ever found. Just a mangled vehicle, empty, as if something had taken them elsewhere. The presence had always been here, and now it had chosen me. Because I asked, because I listened, because I saw my feet moved before my mind decided to follow. One step, then another, toward the door burned into the floor. It wasn't fear now. It was truth, raw, eternal, suffocating. Just before I stepped through, Lila whispered, "You won't come back the same." And something behind her whispered, along with her, "You never were." The fear that stays crossing that threshold wasn't like stepping into another room. It was like stepping out of one, out of time, out of self, out of everything I thought had walls, shape, and reason. There was no floor, no sky, only between a space made of memories I hadn't lived yet. Echoes of my voice calling out from places I'd never been, and surrounding it, all a silence, so dense, it swallowed thought before it could become sound. I was not alone. Shapes hovered just beyond sight, no faces. Only impressions, watching, curious, not hungry, not cruel, just present. I understood then what Lila had meant. This place didn't harm. It revealed. I saw the night our parents vanished. Not crushed in metal, but taken invited, as I had been. Dad had hesitated. Mom had screamed. But the door had opened anyway. Lila had watched it happen, and afterward, she hadn't spoken for weeks. I saw her drawing to understand what she couldn't say. I saw the eye first form in her dreams. Then, in the house, I saw it, choose her, and then, later, wait for me. The house was never haunted. It was alive. A thin place between what we know and what knows us. It needed 2 minds to see, one to receive, the other to remember. And I remembered. Then, I woke back, in my bed. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds. The birds sang. The hum of the fridge returned. The house looked normal, except for one thing. Lila was gone. No sign she'd ever lived here. No drawings, no sketchbook, no name on the mailbox. It was like she'd never existed, accepted me. The only thing left behind was a single drawing, pinned to the inside of my closet door. The same symbol. The central eye, 4 uneven ones around it. Beneath it, in a sharp, unfamiliar hand. You are the door now. I hear the knocking every night. Same time, same pattern. Sometimes, I knock back, not because I want to, because I understand. It's waiting for the next one to see. And someone always will. Because curiosity is stronger than fear. And once you've seen it, you carry it with you. Forever. Even in silence. Even in sleep. Could you sleep after hearing this? What do you think really happened to Lila and the house? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you're still brave enough, explore another tale before bed. You might just start hearing things, too.